about relationships, single and married. There's not too many of us single in here, but maybe you guys can share that with those who are, that you know. Okay. Oh, I didn't give her any verses this time. 1 Corinthians 7, 6-16. Principles for marriage. Now concerning the matters about which you wrote, this is Paul. It is good for a man not to have intimate relations with a woman, but because of the temptation to sexual immorality, those later, each man should have his own wife, and each woman her own husband. The husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights, and likewise the wife to her husband. For the wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. Likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, but then come together again, so that Satan may not tempt you, and because of your lack of self-control. Now, as a concession, not a command, I say this: I wish that all were as I myself am, but each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. So we do not have to get married. We don't have to be in relationships. It's not a requirement. To the unmarried and to the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. The married I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband. If she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife. Now in Matthew 5:32, Jesus says, "But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery." Now, he gives one ground for divorce, and that's sexual immorality. So if you are divorced for any reason other than that, God does not see that as a legitimate divorce. In his mind, you are still married. However, if adultery does take place after that divorce sometime, then the grounds are there, and then she is free to marry and would not be committing adultery. So if a single Christian man is looking to marry a woman and she's divorced and it's not for biblical grounds, and there's no adultery, then you don't want to marry her, because then you'd be committing adultery. Matthew 19:10, the disciples said to him, "If such is the case of a man with his wife, it is better not to marry." But he said to them, "Not everyone can receive the same, but only those to whom it is given." So if marriage without the possibility of divorce is something that you are not uncomfortable with, then don't get married. Now, if you can't fully commit to marriage, that's what I just said. However, this does not mean that you can live with and practice the sin of fornication with somebody that you're not married to. You have to remain celibate. And 1 Corinthians 7, 12-16, "To the rest I say, I, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy because of her husband. Otherwise your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. That the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace. For how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife?" Now this is those who are married and then one of them becomes a believer after the fact, because obviously we are not supposed to marry anybody who's not a believer. The unbelieving spouse and children in a family with a believing spouse are not saved by this association, but they do come under the believing spouse's Christian influence. And so, Paul notes, they are much more likely to be saved in due course through their own faith. Thus, they are in a real sense set apart from other unbelievers and from the evil of the world. Thus, the positive spiritual and moral influence of the believing parent outweighs the negative influence of the unbelieving parent. Do you know somewhere, you got one believing parent, the other one's an unbelieving parent. But the believing parent isn't going to church, not reading their Bible, not doing all these things, so the influence isn't as positive as it should be. To the unmarried and the widowed, now concerning the betrothed, I have no command from the Lord, but I give my judgment as one who, by the Lord's mercy, is trustworthy. I think that in the view of the present distress, it is good for a person to remain as he is. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a betrothed woman marries, she has not sinned. Yet those who marry will have worldly troubles, and I would spare you that. This is what I mean. Brothers, the appointed time has grown very short. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they have no goods, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. And all that's saying is, excuse me, don't focus on the world. Look to the coming kingdom. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I'm surprised it doesn't mention the kids here, because that's a big, big distraction. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks that he is not behaving properly toward his betrothed, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, let him do as he wishes. Let them marry, it is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity but having his desire under control, and has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, he will do well. So that he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. To not marry your betrothed almost sounds silly, doesn't it? For here, you're betrothed, somebody you're engaged to. You have every intent of marrying them. But back then, you could be betrothed to be wife or husband from a baby. They were arranged marriages. So it makes a lot more sense that if you don't follow through with marriage, that gives you somebody that you may not even like, much less love, right? So we're betrothed, but I'll just stay. I won't marry her, And then also take into account that when they were betrothed, that they still lived with their parents. They weren't living together or anything. So it's just like having a, excuse me, like having a girlfriend or a boyfriend, the betrothal, except it's pretty binding. It's like a legal thing. Sorry, I got allergies or something. But yeah, it's not like today where everybody plays married when they're not do everything but get the rings and the commitment. All right. So, to stay unmarried in that situation doesn't seem so crazy. A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if her husband dies, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with dark? So, you never want to marry anybody that is not a Christian. And that also applies to business. You don't be in business with somebody that's not like faith. But in this day and age, politically also, it's because our politically it's good and evil, black and white. You know, life over here, murder the babies over there. You know, marriage between man and woman, and marriage between anything. You know, heterosexuality, homosexuality, transgenderism, and all that stuff. CRT, all kinds of things. It's literally light and dark. And I think you just have more peace in your house if you have the same political leanings also. Now, if the husband dies, Paul says, in his judgment, she is happier if she remains as she is. Now, Paul has the gift of being single, so that may be. When I was going through our short little bit of counseling with my ex, I remember telling her that I was made to be married. Of course, it's been, can you believe, this month, 7 years since my divorce.
Wow.
Yeah, doesn't time fly. 7 years single. So it's the number of completion, of perfection. So I'm ready, God. Or maybe he wants me to stay single. We'll see. Whatever he wants. I can be happy either way. Okay. When you are dating somebody, or thinking about dating them, make sure you have things in common. I believe that's a big reason why so many marriages end in divorce. It's because they don't have enough in common. At first, it's infatuation and perhaps celebrating their others' differences, as they say, opposites attract. Then it's raising children together. But after the children are gone, the two parents look at each other and realize how much they've grown apart. They may not even know who they themselves are anymore. Their own identity can get lost in the busyness of raising kids and going to sporting events and other activities. That chapter in life is over and they ask, who am I? If the spouses are best friends before having children, they will likely resume and be just fine. Best friends are best friends because they have a lot in common and they really click. The person you're thinking about marrying isn't in the top 2 on your best friend list. The further down they are, the more work your marriage will require to be healthy and strong. It's something I've always heard, like, I married my best friend, and I'm like, that sounds great. And I thought about that when I was married. I was like, well, my brother's probably my best friend. Of course, my wife was completely truthful with me in the beginning, and so our marriage is based on some lies, which is part of the problem. But like some of the things that I thought we had in common, we didn't. And not that she was purposely being, can't think of the word, but lying to me or anything, but she was so into me that she was into whatever I was into, right?
Right.
So that wasn't like a purposeful thing. She just thought, yeah, that's great. I'm into cars and trucks and, tractor pulls and all this stuff. When really she wasn't. Athletics. She was not athletic at all. But you want to marry somebody that you can do things with. Like the girl likes to go dancing, and the guy's like, okay, so he goes dancing with her, then they get married, he's like, I don't like to dance. So then she's like, oh, I lost my dancing partner. When she goes and dances with somebody else, well, that could be bad. That could lead to adultery, So you need to have things in common. If you don't have anything in common, find something in common that you guys can do together to pull you together. It's like my wife. I got to tell we were drifting apart, and it's like what can we do? Things that we have in common. And now one thing I'm sorry about is I was doing obstacle course races, and there was one time she wanted to do one with me. I was like, man, I'm so competitive. She's gonna be really slow. Yeah, man, I don't know. So we ended up not doing it. And I've been kicking myself ever since. I was like, man, I should have just done it. And I could just hang back and take it easy. I did that with Andrew. He trained one time. We did the obstacle course race. It was great.
Why do you wait to say that when he's
And then the next time we did it, he wasn't training at all. He wasn't training at all, so he didn't have the endurance, and so I could run on without him, but then, he's my buddy, I'm doing it with him, so I'll just hang back. So I just hung back and took it easy and with him, and that was the most fun and obstacle course race I had, You'd really enjoy all the obstacles and doing everything and not feeling like I was dying the entire time because I'm trying to keep up with these guys in front of me. So, yeah, it was really fun. But the things that Helen used to do was, I think she did some golfing and like tennis, when she was younger. She mentioned doing that. So I brought the golfing thing. We never did do that. I bought us some tennis rackets so we could maybe play tennis together. And it's like, hey, can we go play tennis this weekend? Blah, blah, blah. She never wanted to do it. She never really did anything. So that didn't work out. I tried, but Anyway, have something in common. If you don't, try to find something. Both of you try to find something and make time for it. Make time for each other. Yeah. Okay. Now, where am I? Oh, don't be overly anxious or desperate to be in a relationship, or you will compromise and end up in a relationship that in a short time later you want out of. You will be blinded to their faults and exaggerate their strengths. You may even see things that aren't there. It's like, yeah, no, he's kind of a punk to kids, but if it was our kids, he'd be good, That's a sign. Don't ignore the signs. So, Helen learned that from her second husband. Kirsten was pointing these things out, and she was just, he was so much better than me, loves her so much more than I ever did, and all this stuff, and it turns out he's a narcissist. And so they are very good at just showering you and making you think you're all the best and the greatest in the world, whereas I am very truthful and honest. But the entire time it's all about them and they're focused on self. Never marry anybody who is a narcissist. And one way to know that is they have trouble apologizing. If they apologize, it's either insincere or they'll be like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Be things like that. And of course, they're very self-centered. But don't marry anybody who's a narcissist. Don't marry anybody you don't have the utmost respect for. So if you're a wife who's going to be submissive to her husband, as you're called to be, you got to respect your husband. It's going to be a lot easier to submit to him if you respect him. So don't date anybody, don't marry anybody that you do not respect. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. Don't imply or lead someone to believe you like the things they like just so they'll be more attracted to you. It isn't fair to either of you. They're marrying the person you present to them, the person you say you are, and you must be sure that they are who they say they are, that they are genuine. Look for the signs and don't ignore them. If things don't add up, run. It's a terrible thing to find out the person you're married to doesn't exist, that you were sold a fake bill of goods for a long time, possibly, until one of you dies. You must know how to be happy single before you have any business getting married. Your spouse might make you happy at first, but they cannot keep you happy. If you are broken, they cannot fix what's wrong with you. If you have any baggage whatsoever, you need to see a Christian counselor and get it all sorted out before ever getting married. Or it may surface during the marriage and cause a lot of trouble, potentially and usually resulting in divorce, usually adultery and divorce. This should be done even before dating. So if you got anything in your past, anything traumatic, go see a counselor, get it fixed, because otherwise it'll just possibly mess up your marriage later. Very likely to do so. Doesn't matter how wonderful your spouse is. If you're messed up in the head, in the heart, then they can't help you. And that's a lot to put on your spouse, right? It's your job to make me happy all the time, you know? No. Okay. What am I doing? Paper? I'm not even done with it yet. All right, Galatians 5:19 through 21. Do not date anybody who is like this. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness. Don't date anybody that falls under any of those categories. If there's strife, if there's strife, there's always enmity, jealousy, anger. They have rivalries, causing dissensions and divisions. Very envious. The drunk. Don't even be friends with them. If they possess the bad works, they don't have the Spirit of God in them. And know that if he or she doesn't treat you the best now in the courting phase, he or she will not treat you any better when you are married. It would only be worse. Only be worse, believe me. They are on their absolute best behavior during the courting phase, right? They will never treat you better than they do during that time. So, if the dude's a jerk now, he's just going to be a total a-hole later. Okay, but the fruit of the Spirit, so this is what you want in that potential spouse. Fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, don't those just sound wonderful? Yeah. Isn't that what you want your spouse to have?
Yes.
If you are married, you should have towards your spouse love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, long-suffering, same as patience, but, kind of gentleness and self-control. So that is all I have on the single one. Now we get to the married. In Ephesians 5:24-33, now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Now this is where the guy's like, yeah, woman, submit to me. And then we're like, why is that in there? That is such a hard saying, right? So, but I truly believe that if the man submits to God as he's supposed to, and he loves and sacrifices for his wife like he's supposed to, and follows God like he's supposed to, the wife will have no trouble submitting to him. Amen. Right?
Amen.
If you have a bad leader, it's hard to obey that bad leader, right?
Yes.
If you have a really good leader, then sure, whatever. Tell me what to do, I'll do it.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Like if I was in the military, being under Biden, I would question every single thing that ever came down the pipe from him. If I was under Trump, like, all right, this guy has our best interests at heart, let's go. So yeah, and dogs are a good example. The dogs, there needs to be an alpha. Probably with any animal, really. There needs to be an alpha. And if there isn't one, they will be one. So if you don't show your dog that you're the alpha, then the dog is going to be the alpha. You can have an attitude, they may bite you and whatever else. We had a guy at work who's they got this puppy, and his wife would literally hand feed the dog the food and everything, and just totally pampered. And it had a total attitude, and it would bite her at times, the hand that fed her, and all that stuff, because the dog was the alpha. So you got to be So the man, the head of the home, as God instructed it, you've got to be the alpha. And not in the sense that I'm the alpha over my dog, where I yell at him and he sits there and quivers in fear. It's not like that. Okay. This is when there's a leadership vacuum, somebody needs to fill that vacuum, and women will step up and take care of it. If you're not leading in the home, your wife will step up. Women are good about that. When leaders lead, others will follow. So if you lead, your wife will follow. Now, in Israel, when they were taken over by Jabin, as God allowed that to happen because Israel was sinning after Ehud or something. They had a righteous judge, time of the judges, had a righteous judge, and he gave them like 80 years of freedom. And you know, everything was fantastic. Had a righteous judge, a great leader, and everybody followed him, and it was great. So then he died, and then everybody went, they started following after other gods and all that stuff. So God's like, okay, I'm not going to be your God anymore, fine. And then he let Jabin take Israel over. So they were oppressed for 20 years. And Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, had 900 iron chariots. Iron chariots that would just literally crush you, run you over. And Barak, the commander of the Israeli army, and I guess everybody else, every other man there, was afraid to go up against Sisera and face those 900 chariots. So they're like, no, they didn't do it. So God went to Deborah and said, hey, I need you to step up and get Barak to do what he needs to do. So God came to Deborah, and so Deborah goes to Barak and says, has God not said to, get 10,000 men and go to do, and God will bring out Sisera and all this stuff. And he's like, I'll go if you go with me. So she's like, whatever, let's do this. So it's like he believed that, what God said was right, and what she told him was right, that it was from God, and but that wasn't enough. But she had absolute confidence in the Word of God, and so she's like, let's go. And then with her, he went. So they went and conquered. But because he was so afraid, he did not get the praise for killing Sisera. That was given to Jael. Remember, because he hid in her tent, and then she put the pentag through his temple. So so it was a woman that was needed to make it happen, and it was a woman that finished it.
Woman had to take care of it.
Yeah. So that's what happened, man, if we don't step up, okay? You gotta step up. You gotta put on our big boy pants. Cowboy up, as they say. What? All right. So husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes it and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his mother and father, that's backwards, father and mother, and hold fast to his wife. Hold fast to his wife. And the two shall become one flesh. That's why you are never separate. This mystery, however, let each one of you love his... This mystery, there we go, is profound. And I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. We did a study on love and respect a long time ago, but it mentioned how men desire respect more than love, and women, their whole world revolves around love. So a man needs to show that he loves his wife, and the wife needs to show that she respects her husband. It's very important. Right here in the Word of God. All right, 1 Peter 3, 5 through 8. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are their children, if you do good and do not fear anything that is frightening. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as a weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Now, sometimes it seems like guys can be the weaker vessel. That's one of the reason why the women step up. But sometimes there's just conflict. The wife's not being submissive because maybe the guy's not showing her love and being understanding and doing everything he's supposed to be doing. Maybe he's an idiot. I don't know. Maybe she didn't respect him and shouldn't have married him in the first place. But where was I going with that? Shoot. Oh, so you have arguments, and sometimes the guy will just be like, whatever. So he just backs out, lets her run the show, take the lead, be the alpha, and just to keep the peace, he just lets her lead. That's not the way it's supposed to be. Proverbs 18:22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. In Proverbs 31:10. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. So know what you have, gentlemen, in your wives. More precious than anything else. Now, these following verses aren't necessarily for married couples, but for relationships nonetheless. And I put them in here because I'm surprised that when I see spouses and sometimes the way they talk to each other. Like, I know, like, this one guy, he's like super sweet, always sweet to everybody. And he was talking to his wife one time in just a very rude manner. And I'm like, what? And it just like really took me by surprise. So like, I can't see him speaking to anybody in the way he speaks to his wife. And part of that is because we're so comfortable with our spouse, right? Around them all the time. You seem to be a little more free, I guess, but that shouldn't be the case. Ephesians 5:21, submitting to one another. Submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. So yes, the wife is supposed to submit to her husband's authority, but we are supposed to all submit to each other out of reverence for Christ. We can submit to our wives. I don't have one. Two main principles I picked up on in the leadership books that I've read are be the example and serve those under your charge. The higher the position you hold, the more influence you have, and the better positioned you are to serve others. Jesus was a son of God, and boy, did he serve, didn't he?
Amen.
So, be that leader. Serve your family. Serve your wife. Do what's best for her. Ephesians 4:32, be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Keep that in mind whenever your spouse upsets you. Be tender-hearted, be kind, forgiving. There's so many times. What's the secret to a happy, long marriage? It's forgiveness. And humility. You have to be humble. There's no place for pride. It's like those narcissists. They have low self-esteem. And so they cut their spouse down all the time because they feel so terrible about themselves. So they cut their wife down to try to bring them down. To kind of build them up, but to also be like, I don't deserve you, you're so much better, blah, 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 so I'm going to tear you down, make you think that you're not worth a hoot, so that you won't need me. there's that type also. Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 11. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. If they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And the way man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not easily broken. That is your marriage. You are so much stronger together. One of you falls, the other one is there to pick you up. You know?
Amen.
One thing, after Helen left, I was going to take my car to get it inspected or some tires or something. I was like, who's going to pick me up when I drop this thing off? Why is it so handy? Kirsten didn't have her license yet, but she'd been driving, her permit for a while. So I was like, you just go ahead and pick me up. But yeah, it was like one of the first things, like, man. In Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. No corrupting talk towards your spouse or anyone else. Build her or him up. Matthew 7:12, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law. The golden rule. As everybody, 1 Corinthians 13:4-6. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Ephesians 4:2-3. With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. That's some peaceful marriages. Have humility. A little humility on the range this Friday. Yeah, we were shooting our guns. I dropped out my magazine. We're reloading. I look over. Andrew's got this 45, right? 45 extended mag. Extended mag, more capacity and everything. Got this Breakfast sitting over there, held it down. Got this little bitty single stack 9mm magazine sitting there. Man, your magazine is so much bigger than mine. And he does something, whatever. And then, I look down, I don't even see my 9mm casings. All I see is these big 45 casings laying down there. And Chris wisely says, it's not the size of the magazine that matters. And I'm like, oh, that's true, which could give me comfort, except Andrew was also out shooting me. So I had nothing. My gun was prettier. I guess I could do that. So, I had to go home, rub my truck, flex in the mirror, crack a beer, watch some football. Yeah! Humility! Gotta be humble. Song of Solomon 4:7. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Say it about your spouses. You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you. Even if you're acting flawed, just say that to yourself over and over again, right? And 1 Corinthians 16:14. Let all that you do be done in love. That concludes the sermon for today. I hope it wasn't too boring or whatever. So it looks like we have that. Can't think of it right now.
Union.
Communion, thank you. Music going?